Welcome everyone to Sports Cards Anonymous. This is a channel where we have conversations about cards. And that guy right there in the background, his name is Odin. For those of you who've seen him in the video, he's got one blue eye and one brown eye, so we thought Odin was an appropriate name. This is the slow burn. I ran a poll this week on the channel. It was about Kevin O'Leary. So Kevin O'Leary, of course, you know, has bought many tens of millions of dollars in cards over the last, 6 to 12 months. And the question on the poll was, do you respect his collection? He has 8 cards. It's probably worth, $20-25 million plus. If you ask him how much it's worth, he might say 60 million, who knows? I ask you, do you respect his collection? Got over 100 votes. Over 70% of people said no. So we collectively as a community can look at that billionaire's collection and say we don't respect it. We all understand it's worth oodles of money, but it's missing something. And you know what it really is, it's 8 cards that together, they don't tell a story. So they're soulless. It's soulless. And it feels like a venture capitalist fund because that's exactly what it is. And because of that, because it lacks the soul, we don't respect it. And of course, there's a lot of reasons into that, why it lacks soul and how do you build that in. But when we look at that, when we judge that other person from the outside, it's easy for us to say, yeah, it's worth a lot of money, but the money doesn't matter. That's a bad collection. And what's so interesting to me about us, I don't know if it's our insecurities or what, it's probably what I'm going to say in this video. If we turn that telescope or that microscope around, we turn the microscope around, and instead of looking at Kevin O'Leary, we look at ourselves. And we say, hey, do people respect your collection? A lot of folks in the hobby will respond and say, I don't care what people think about my collection, and they don't respect my collection because it's not worth a lot of money. So when we judge someone else's collection, we collectively can agree the money doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's expensive or cheap. It's not a good collection, or it is a good collection. That's not how respect is earned. Respect isn't earned through the dollars. But when we turn the microscope around and look at ourselves, we immediately flip that switch and say, oh no, the money matters. Right? People won't respect my collection because it's not worth a lot of money, because it's not that valuable. And to me, when I think about this, what am I thinking through? This is the insecurity of many collectors being projected onto other people. So we have the proof that the money doesn't matter. We don't respect Kevin O'Leary's collection. But when we start looking at our own collection, we say we're concerned other people won't respect it because it's cheap. But we know deep down the money doesn't matter. So what are we really saying? I think what we're really saying is we're concerned that we haven't put the thought and effort into the collection, and so it does not deserve the respect of other collectors. And we're going to talk about the respect point in a bit, because I know some of you may have some qualms that I'm even putting that out there. We'll talk about it in a moment. I have really enjoyed this space on YouTube in the last few months. I have really enjoyed digging into discussing what it means to build a meaningful collection, right? And this is a continuation of that discussion. And I think at the heart of it is, you have got to sit down and build out your museum. You have got to build your scope of collection, and then you've got to start to fill in that story and tell that story and really think through it. And if you sit down and build that strategy out, I think you're going to be much happier with your collection than if you just go purchase to purchase, dopamine to dopamine, and just let the hobby dictate to you on a whim. If you're interested in doing this, I have a free template. It's in the pinned link down below. Go check it out. You join the Discord for free, and you get the template for free, right? The template's free forever. Discord's free for a month. So when we talk about projecting insecurities and being defensive about our collection, I want to talk about the history of collection a little bit. Building a collection. This started in ancient times. Kings and rulers, they would have battles back in those days. And when the battle was over, they would select a memento from the battlefield. because that memento captured a moment in time where they displayed great ability and great power. And then when they go back to their home or whatever the case is, they would put it on display. And their collection was a series of mementos that displayed great power and ability. Then, as we move out of that phase a little bit, we move into the Roman Empire. The Romans are our, we used to call them our spiritual forefathers of collecting. The way that Romans started to collect is very much how we collect today. Romans were obsessed with Greek culture. And so if you went to some Roman aristocrat's house or villa, it would be filled with Greek artifacts. And so they were collecting Greek artifacts. Now, this was a private collection. It was put in their house. But the purpose of that collection was to flex. It was to build a public persona. It was to gain, it was to show people when they came over. It was to show them, look at the great taste that I have in these great and wonderful Greek artifacts. And by the way, they saw Greek artifacts not only as art or as a cultural, significance, but they also saw them as investments. I thought it was kind of interesting because that's kind of how we see fine art today. So they were impressing upon the people that would come in, look at my ability to purchase these great artifacts, look at my, ability to find them, and look at my stunning and great taste that I have in my collection. And then out of the Roman Empire, then the main collector for the next period of time is the Catholic Church, collecting relics of the saints. It's a private collection that's put on display. There's going to be a theme here. Moving out of that period, moving out of the Middle Ages, you start to see the Cabinet of Curiosities, which of course is still with us today in the form of a curio cabinet. And in the Cabinet of Curiosities, again, this would have been for rich people. Some earl invites you over to his house, and as part of dinner, think Downton Abbey. As part of dinner, he's going to show you his Cabinet of Curiosities, and he's going to run you through. They mostly collected natural science stuff, so this might have been a skull from Africa and some, unique thorn bush or something. I don't know. I'm just coming up with stuff at this point. But it was a series of artifacts. And if that person had a good collection, you'd go over there, they would show it off, and it would be so well done that you were enamored with it and you thought it was amazing. It was a great evening. But if it was a bad collection, if they had done a poor job of putting it together, then they played the part of the fool because, you spent time showing off your collection to an audience, but it didn't deserve that time, that audience time, because you hadn't put the proper thought and energy into that collection. And then moving out of the Cabinet of Curiosities, we move into the fine art era that we're in now via the Renaissance. And of course, we look for great pieces of art. And the standard here would be, of course, museums. Museums are private collections that are put on public display to tell a story, right? Which is kind of the whole theme of my museum analogy that I've used for the last few months. And in the same way, right, when we think about our collection, as much as our collection is private, right? If you ask the collector, do you care what someone else thinks about your collection? Most of them would say no. And they are right to a degree. Should you care what other collectors think about the individual cards in your collection? No, you should not. You should not give a hoot and holler what anyone else thinks about the individual cards in your collection, right? Those are the pieces that you find interesting, that tie to your story, that meet your stunning standard. That's the art is in the eyes of the beholder, right? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But there's a second side of that question, and it's, should you care what other people think about your collection in total? And I think a lot of us will say, we might want to say no, you shouldn't care. But I would argue history states that you do care. History states that collecting is, even though it's done in private, it is a public act, just like marriage. Marriage is private in that it's you and your missus, and that's a private thing, but you get married in public. You get married in front of the public. You get married in front of friends and family. And in the same way, your collection, even if you're not showing it off to people, it is something done in private, but that has a public audience. And even if you say, well, I'm not showing my collection to anyone, there's still a public audience for that collection. You are still leaving your thumbprint on the world. You are displaying your taste and your ability to collect and curate a collection of note. You are displaying your ability to tell a story. And if you're just going piece to piece, you know, you're playing the part of the fool, right? You were playing the part of the fool from the the Cabinet of Curiosities, from, you know, the post-medieval era. But if you can sit down and think about, what story do I want to tell? How do I respect this story? And you start to weave that together via your collection. Now, you know, the individual cards, you know, they may be 25-cent, 50-cent cards. It doesn't matter. But when they all come together, they tell a great story. And I want to go back to the idea of respect, Kevin O'Leary, value. You know, if we say Kevin O'Leary's on the far end of like, hey, he spent a ton of money, but he has no respect. This is a scale. You know, forgetting about money, think about somebody who might be in the middle of this scale. I think Jeff Wilson. I think 5-6 years ago, he would have been on the side of the scale where like nobody really respected his collection. I think he's gained a lot of, I don't want to say public trust, but, you know, the public sees him as someone, he's not here for a quick bag, like he's in it for the long haul. And you can see he's put some chops in at getting better at being a collector and buying interesting cards. And, you know, I don't think he's got a scope of collection or anything like that. I can argue some of the stuff is kind of, I don't know if it all ties in, but he's in the middle of the scale, right? Like, okay, you know, he's getting better. And then on the far end of like the most respected collections, this might be, I forget the gentleman's name, but he was on Sports Cards Investors. They went through his collection. It was the guy who was dumping T206s on the table like they're candy. And then he had a closet, an amazing display of game-used bats from Hall of Famers and all-time greats. Now, this guy, you look at that collection, you say, well, it's worth a lot of money, and it's an awesome collection. Yeah, but when he talks about his collection, it was never about money. He'd been doing this for 50 years plus, and when he displays it, there's this infectious energy about the story these cards are telling that he's excited to tell and to show that he preserved and curated. And then, you know, what's the word? You know, enhanced via the bats too. So he's got the cards and the bats telling a great story. I don't know how you watch that video and don't immediately go to eBay and look at T206 cards or game used bats. Like, it's so infectious. And that's the scale of respectability of the soulless collection, the Kevin O'Leary, the venture capitalist fund, and then to the other extreme, the guy who's put together this amazing, compelling story, collecting big cards and small cards and artifacts and putting it all together. And it's just enthralling to be a part of, to witness, to get to see. And going back, you know, I've got this template, this museum blueprint. You know, we think so often, and it's not that we think, it's we get pushed so often, these keystone, these massive cards. And we think that that's how you collect, is to build massive card after massive card after massive card. But that's not how you build a good and meaningful collection. When you're telling a story, it's not 15 massive cards in a row. When you're telling a story, you are picking, you are choosing, hey, these are the 3 important artifacts that need to be the centerpiece of this part of the story. And then you are filling in the rest of the page with a series of depth pieces. And these pieces aren't $10,000 pieces. They're not $1,000 pieces. They can be 25-cent pieces. I'll give you an example. As I'm putting together my Astros wing of my museum. That's the other thing too. I don't know if I've mentioned that, but you know, I got the whole analogy of your scope of collection. That defines what your museum is that you're building. But then inside the museum, you have different wings. You're telling different stories that all tie to that same scope. So, you know, one of my wings is the Killer Bees, the Astros of the 90s, right? And a little bit longer and a little bit earlier than that, but, you know, roughly 1991 to 2005 is how I define it. And even inside of there's 3 different eras. There's the tequila shoulder era, the blue jerseys of the late 90s, and then the Enron, Minute Maid Park era of the red brick jerseys. And you think about that blue, the blue era in the Astrodome. So I've got some nice essential credentials, right? Those are my keystone cards that I want to show off to highlight that era. Great images of Bagwell and Biggio, and then just great cards of the 90s that kind of tell the story of the 90s as well. But then as I fill that wing in, if that was a gallery wall, what would I surround the showstopper Bagwell essential credentials with? And I've bought a $1 Carl Everett card because I like the image. It's inside the Astrodome, which is, funny enough, hard to get pictures of. And that tells a story. He was a center fielder in 98 and 99. I grabbed Derek Bell. It's another, 50-cent card if I want it to be. Left fielder, great left fielder for us during that era. I grabbed Shane Reynolds, our ace during that tenure. And the Astros have a history of ace pitchers. And he was fantastic, even though a lot of people may not know who he is. I grab a Billy Wagner. I grab Brad Ausmus, Ken Caminiti, Ricky Gutierrez, these role players, these guys nobody else knows about. And you put this in the collection, and you're telling that full story, and you are creating depth and richness in that story. And that's what creates the soul of the collection, and what in the end brings, we'll call it respect to your collection, but maybe you could say completeness. It shows that you've put some thought into the collection and that you care that it's this complete thing. Because if you don't, to me, I think this is true. If you don't really put time and effort and thought into your collection, why would anyone else give it the time of day for themselves? If you haven't sat down and thought about what am I actively trying to collect, why would anyone else give a hoot and holler what you're trying to collect? And again, you might rebuff that with, I don't care what other people think about my collection. And I understand the sentiment, but in the end, the collection, even though it is done in private, it is this thing that we do that has a public impact, even if we're not showing it to anyone. And let me share one more thing, going back to the Romans, not to get too highbrow. Funny enough, I'm talking about Romans. I don't know if you're going to catch this on the camera, but that's a Valkyrie cigar. It's all right. It's actually pretty good. Enjoying it. Even if you said you were a hermit and you never wanted to show, you're never going to show your cards to your collection to anyone. You're going to die and your house is just going to get set on fire because no one's ever going to come see it. The Romans and art, philosophers would argue you still have an audience for your collection. And because you have an audience, you want to build a collection in a respectable manner. You want to put real thought and energy into it, right? And that audience can be a few things. It could be your past self or your future self. So you're putting your collection together today for you to enjoy in the future. Or, like a lot of us do in this day and age, we enjoy our nostalgia so much. A lot of the collections that we put together are an ode to our former and younger selves. And so you're building this collection for like the 12-year-old you. And then I feel this a lot in my collection. We're putting together a collection to tell a story of our roots. And some of that is an appreciation for the area we grew up in, but a lot of it is an appreciation for the lives of the lives that our ancestors lived before us. And the Romans had a name for this, and it's called pietas. I don't speak Latin, so forgive me if the pronunciation's all off, but you don't speak Latin either, so you would never know. I shouldn't have said anything. And this idea is that we want to, or we owe it to our ancestors to respect their stories, right? And to highlight them. And I think a lot of us do that in our collecting. We want to respect the stories of our father, of our grandfather, of our grandparents, aunts, uncles, so on. And so as we put together a collection to respect that story, we think in our heads, man, my grandmother would have loved this. And so in that way, even though there's no physical audience for the card today or for the collection today, the way that you see it, in your head, you know that there is an audience for that collection. And if I can boil it all down to one final comment, it may not have sounded this way, but this video is not about you winning the respect of your peers. All of this, everything that I'm doing on YouTube is not about you winning respect of others. I understand completely that it doesn't matter. Really, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. What I found in my own journey is that I, for the longest time, was not happy with my collection. And I searched how to do it better and how to be better. And I just really struggled to find that. I couldn't find that content. I couldn't find those discussions. And that's when I started to reach out into fine art and looking over there, because there's a lot more discussion there. And that's when I started to feel a lot more satisfaction in my collecting. And I started to feel more enrichment in my collecting. And so the point of all that is, I knew deep down I wasn't happy with my collection, but I didn't know how to do it different. I didn't know how to make it better. And the point of this is not for you to make someone else happy. The point of this is, if you're looking at your collection and you're like, I know I have the ability to make a great collection, but I'm just, for some reason, it's just not coming together. I don't know why it's not. This is what helped me, right? These ideas, what I'm talking about, this history, the stuff that I've learned along the way, this is what helped me, and it's quite fulfilling. I talk about the depthness, I talk about the richness inside of each piece, right? That's the stunning standard. So people hear that and they think I'm saying expensive pieces, but I have never said that the stunning standard means an expensive piece. I have often said the opposite. I say find what type of card you like, and I mention every time, that includes base cards. Find what type of card you like, and then go find the stunning standards of that type of card. I think you could build an amazing collection just using base cards and on a very limited budget. You just got to tell a story, and it's all got to tie together. Because if you tell a story about your upbringing and whatever, your nostalgia, your loved ones, your ancestors, you may feel other people don't really care about that, but when you show it off and you present it well, people will care. That the energy that you put into your collection is the output as well. If you put a lot of energy and effort into it, it's infectious, and people will see that and they will appreciate your collection. And that's a way, especially if it's geared towards, it's a way to highlight the story and to give it the appreciation that you're trying to do as a collector, as a curator, right? You're trying to highlight some story. You're trying to tell something and show that you have a great appreciation for it. And if you don't put that collection together in a thoughtful way, you are never going to share that appreciation with anyone else. It will have the opposite effect. People will see what you're putting together and then think it's goofy because you didn't put the proper thought into it. And then so instead of spreading appreciation about that story that you care so much about, which, could be the history of a city, could be the history of your family, could be nostalgia, it could be your best friend, could be whatever. Instead of spreading that appreciation, you have people walking away scratching their heads and like, what is this guy on about? So that's the video for today. It's the second time in a row I've talked about kind of respect in the collection, and I won't do it again. I won't do it again, at least for some time. I wanted to get all this out there. There's a lot on my mind about this stuff because I see so many times in my comments, people say, I don't care what people think about my collection, and in the same comment, they will say, I only buy dollar cards or $20 cards or $50, whatever they view as a value card. I only buy value cards, so they're talking about me, you will never respect my collection. I never said there's any dollar requirements to a collection. All I've said is spend time and effort thinking through what it is you're trying to put together. And that goes back to what I said at the beginning. These people are just projecting their insecurities about their own shortcomings in their own collection onto me because that's what's easy to do. That's easier to do than to look at themselves and say, I'm not happy with what I've built. I've done this for 10 years, 5 years, 7 years, 2 years, whatever, and I'm not happy with it. And I would, if you find yourself in that boat, I would urge you to, instead of saying, I'm not happy with it, and then just lean into what it is you're not happy with, I would say, really look at that and judge for yourself. If you're not happy with your collection, what can you be doing differently? Try something different. And I hope that what I talk about here and with my template and the other discussions that I have, I hope that it sparks something in anyone out there who's looking for something along these lines of, I love collecting, but I'm not happy with my collection. Why? That's what I'm trying to get to the heart of. That's the video for today. I hope you all enjoy it. Happy opening day to anyone who participates. I hope all of your team wins, unless you're an Angels fan, in which case I really hope you lose, because go Stros.